Hey there, guys. I know I was supposed to talk about lore next, if you follow on Twitter, which you should, but I want to talk about Ludonarrative first.
Look into your soul to steady your hands.
Ludonarrative is important because Pathologic gives us lore and storytelling through its gameplay. That's why it's a game and not a book. Other better YouTubers, or rather more prominent ones, have already spoken to this, and you should definitely check out those videos too. In fact, if you're here, you probably already have and are starved for content, so eat up. I really want to talk about the first gun you encounter in the game. I really like this example because it happens quickly, it is extremely punishing, and it serves to teach the player while also giving them a taste of the classic Pathologic experience. See, the first gun, when you encounter it, is super expensive and only available for 2 days. Laws of scarcity indicate that players will see this as desirable. And if the player saves all their coins for this weapon and the ammo to use it, they won't have much food. If it's their first playthrough, they likely don't know about the easy ways to get food on day 1, or that the pistol is kind of overpriced and shitty. Now don't get me wrong, it comes in modest condition, but it degrades whenever it's used. And as the condition worsens, so too does its accuracy at point-blank range, and it has a greater chance of simply not firing at all, forcing Artemy to perform this really long, drawn-out, unjamming animation in which a bandit will stab him 2 or 3 times before he has a chance to respond. This is especially difficult because enemies can often take more than one shot to the chest without dying, so even if your pistol does fire successfully, there's a very good chance that its limited stopping power will allow an enemy to get very close to Artemy and introduce the Ripper to their Ripper. Honestly, Artemy's heavy punch has more stopping power than the pistol. It's kind of pathetic. This is even especially highlighted when you realize that you have to fight more than one enemy at a time. If you're surrounded by multiple enemies, you're screwed, since you can't even block attacks while holding the gun. And if you need to reload after missing a shot, or your gun jams, the animation leaves you totally helpless and you will get bodied very quickly. In all, while the pistol is a nice addition to your toolkit, the cost of maintaining it, the lack of usefulness in an ambush combat situation, and the opportunity cost of stocking up on cheap food on day 1 make the starting pistol a really poor choice. New and old players alike probably shouldn't buy it, unless they're so secure in their food and other supplies that can be bought with money that they could afford it. And even then, they should probably just invest in cloaks and toolkits instead. So why would IPL make this an option in the first place? I mean, do they just enjoy the suffering of their players that much? Well, they do, but this is also an example of the game's mechanics teaching the player about not only how to play the game, but what the game world is like. When we read the description of the pistol, we find that the gun's origin is from outside of the town, probably from somewhere closer to the front lines of the country's civil war. When speaking to multiple characters throughout the intro, we learn that violence and crime was uncommon until the murder of your father. Moreover, many characters urge you not to enact violence, even when attacked, since it will tank your reputation and lead to only more chaos. And then, the player heard all that information and decided to buy the gun anyway. In the face of constant threat, the player decided to use their limited resources to assuage their fears, only to be punished by a lackluster reward. The worst part is that the player is now stuck, with limited money left over from buying the gun and bullets, or trading away valuable items for these said bullets. The player is likely starving, and has few options to feed themselves and avoid a starvation loop, unless they turn to crime. See, at this point, the player is likely done Badgreaves' quest with the lockpick, where a tragedian actively encourages Artemy to steal in order to survive. Moreover, if they flub this quest like I did, and cut out some organs alongside the lockpick, they've already got some meat in their inventory when they return to Grief and meet Var. Var is underused in a lot of playthroughs because most dissections lower your reputation, and players typically try to keep that high in order to be able to trade in all the shops. But if you're broke, you can't shop anyway, so that doesn't matter. So, you can fall right into the playstyle of Looter Artemy. You can break into homes in districts you don't care about, take everything, kill the people inside who try to stop you, take their valuables and their inside meat, and sell it for a profit to buy food and bullets in other districts and the underground shops. Congratulations! You are exactly what Clara said you were. And Really, when you're in a situation where the environment itself is trying to kill you, and human cooperation is scarce as it is, having one of the last hopes for the populace's survival prioritize self-defense and violence over basic necessities like food, well, what exactly did you expect to happen? So, what does this comedy of errors tell us about Artemy as a character? Well, one could interpret that he ultimately shouldn't be the type of person who does choose violence first. In Pathologic 1, he was given a gun for free on the condition that he murdered a child. Or teenager, but semantics at that point don't really matter. In this game, the reimagining of the same story, his violence is scaled back, and he's just forced to choose between having a weapon and eating. Maybe this restrictive path to Second Amendment practice is meant to guide the player to not use guns, and perhaps avoid conflict on the whole. After all, health and healing items are expensive too, and oftentimes the loot and reputation boost you get from killing looters doesn't outweigh your health lost. Hell, dying isn't cheap either. The game actively punishes you for the rest of its duration when you die, with an NPC specifically designed to taunt you and call you a shithead after you're murdered. How clear can the game be when it tells you not to engage in combat unless absolutely necessary? And yet you still chose to buy the gun over food. Now all that said, you can't entirely blame the player. In playing other games, you've learned that combat, especially in horror games, is often very difficult, and you'll want any edge you can get. And you realize, probably implicitly, that combat will sometimes be unavoidable. And that's true. Particularly in certain missions, like when the Haruspex has to defend his family home from criminals, or when he travels to the abattoir to meet Mark Immortal 9 more times before the game ends. But in both of these cases, firearms aren't the most useful way to approach the encounter. Hell, in the latter scenario, you're not even allowed to do so. In both instances, Artemy performs better when he's up close and quiet, utilizing stealth and his hands, or a small tool, like a knife, is how he does his grim work, and how he does it successfully. In most combat guides you can read online, people will often advise you to just stick to the shadows and attack stealthily. That is honestly the best way to approach combat 9 out of 10 times. When we look at the descriptions of the melee weapons, moreover, we see Artemy reflect on the kin belief that healing and butchery are closely related, if not the same art. When he looks at the descriptions of firearms, he often feels uncomfortable, or deflects the idea of using them onto someone else. This is a soldier's rifle. This is Grief's shotgun. It's not a tool for him. Now, a scalpel, or the Mancu's finger, now that was meant for him. Artemy as a character is constantly referred to by his hands, and how heavy they can be when he uses his surgical tools. Many characters allude to the fact that he thinks with his hands, and Artemy even says the same thing. Perhaps, if he is to enact violence on others, it should be with his own hands, and not with machines that make destruction of a body impersonal and easy. That seems like more of the tool for a bachelor of some kind. If Artemy is to take life, he should do it personally, himself, with either his hands or a small tool that was made for him, because after all, if you're going to be a ripper, you may as well cut along the lines. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. As I mentioned at the top, I'm going to cover Laura next. I just had this thought when I replayed Pathologic 2, and I really wanted to get these ideas out there, so hopefully this sated your desire for content until the next video comes out. Hopefully that'll be out pretty soon. Follow on Twitter or Tumblr. Twitter's where I'm most active, and obviously subscribe if this was even a halfway decent video, which I'd give it a 6.5. And as always, remember Black Lives Matter. We're like over day 100 in protests. Remember that there's an election coming up, and both options are shitty, but one is clearly shittier than the other, and you dig in your heart of hearts and decide what that means. You know. There have also been many disasters around the world. Please, in addition to doing your due diligence as an American, maybe, if you are an American, and voting and supporting Black Lives Matter, make sure to give to organizations that will assist in the many important causes happening around the world. Links in the description. And yeah, thank you for watching. Peace. Also, as a quick side note, if you've already played Pathologic a couple times and you don't really want a challenge, you just kind of want to have fun with the game while you, I don't know, look for rare dialogue options to round out your knowledge of the game and gain access to new lore, just thinking out loud, lower your running rate, increase player damage, and decrease hunger damage and the rate at which hunger accrues, and buy the pistol, and then just run around shooting everyone you encounter. The game gets a little silly, but it plays like an old-fashioned shooter, kind of like Doom, just with your fellow sad, plague-riddled citizens and worms instead of demons. It's a little goofy, but it's kind of fun. That was my most recent playthrough, and it was just wacky. That's what got me thinking about the pistol. Okay, going for real this time. Peace.